This week's guest, he was a great player. He's an awesome analyst and an all-around great guy. Duane Forde joins us for a CFL preview. Joe Tilley Sports coming up. Welcome to the program. We're talking football. Today's guest, he is a Toronto native, an all-star fullback at the University of Western Ontario. He was a Mustangs captain. He won the Vanier Cup. He was a two-time MVP with the club, first-round CFL draft choice by the Stampeders. He played for 4 CFL seasons over 12 years, 4 CFL teams over 12 years. He won 2 Grey Cup titles. He's a TSN game analyst, calling the games with Rod Black. He's married to our old cohort, Sherry Forde. He's a member of the Mississauga Sports Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, Duane Forde. Welcome to the program, Duane.
Thank you. After that introduction, I think you're in line to be hired as my agent.
Great. I'm glad to have you on the show, buddy. Hey, I'll be your agent anytime. Well, first of all, I want to talk about Sherry, your wife. When did she get home from Tokyo? And tell us what she's been doing over there.
Yeah, Sherry's got a couple more weeks in Tokyo, covering the Olympics, working for Olympic Broadcasting Services. She has been at the pool, so she's had the pleasure, although it's an international, sort of nonpartisan, completely neutral broadcast outlet, providing interviews, stories, etc., for rights holders around the world. I do think that things have worked out nicely for her as a Canadian, to be covering swimming and obviously to be around the success, particularly of the Canadian women in the pool. I think that's been a great experience for her. So fantastic. I'm glad she's enjoying it, even though the house is falling apart without her.
Yeah, I can imagine. We just showed a picture there. Maybe you can show it again, Vic. She posted this. We pulled it off her posting. She had the first interview with Penny Oleksiak after Penny became the most decorated athlete in Canadian history, Canadian Olympic history, and she even got Penny's flowers. So
yeah,
Duane,
pretty cool souvenir.
Never a bad, you know what? It's probably cool, and you should probably get her some flowers when she gets home to let her know how much you missed her. And it's never a bad thing for all the guys watching the program. It's never a bad thing when you get your wife some flowers, but that was a pretty cool opportunity for her to be there for that. And as you mentioned, the Canadian team in the pool has done extremely well. Like it's I think 8 of the 14 or 15 medals, or 8 or 9 of the 14, 50 medals they got have come out of the pool. So it's a good gig to be good gig to be on right now.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I now tell us a little bit about your family, because I know Sherry's over there in Tokyo. You're struggling without her, I'm sure, but tell us about the kids.
Yeah, it's been kind of from 0 to 100 for our family, as I'm sure it has for many others, as we hopefully make our way out of this pandemic and things ease their way back to normal. I mean, my kids are teenagers and are both very active in sports. And so, for Sherry and I, when we're not working, that's a huge part of our lives, is being involved in the sports in which our kids have been competing, whether it's been hockey, football, basketball. We're often a family divided where 2 of us are going in one direction, 2 are going in the other direction to some sporting event. And so some of their things are starting to ramp back up. And the result has been, long story short, that there has not and will not be a lot of all 4 Fords in the same place at the same time through the summer of 2021. But we've had plenty of togetherness over the last 16 months, so I'm sure we'll manage.
Yeah, and speaking of family, you've been together with Rod Black for all these years. I mean, he must feel like he's part of the family. You guys have been doing this for a long time now. And you tell us about your relationship working alongside Rod, and you can be honest because he's a regular on the show here, and we don't mind telling the truth.
Yeah, I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have, since 2008, had Rod Black as my primary play-by-play man over the years. Rod is the Rod that people see on TV is very much the same guy off camera. Outgoing, fun, easy to be around, pleasure to work with, pleasure to hang out with. Just a great guy, a lot of fun. I think we kind of found our chemistry pretty early and genuinely enjoy working together. It's not a case where we've just been thrown together and have to work together, but I think genuinely enjoy the time that we get to spend together in the booth.
Right, and being so tight with Rod and his family, how cool was it to see Tyler get drafted by the Brewers in the first round a couple of weeks back?
It's pretty funny. I mean, you think here's a young man that, for me, as I said, Rod and I have worked together in 2008. So, his kids, I've known them since they were in elementary school, Tyler being the oldest, and have followed his journey. I very proudly, I have a pretty good collection of college sweatshirts. And so one of the ones that often raises eyebrows when I wear it is Wright State, which is one that Tyler actually got for me when he was in his first year down there. And so I wear that very proudly, and we'll all see if we can get a percentage of that signing bonus from Tyler.
Well, at least dinner, for crying out loud. Come on. So let's get into your career a little bit here. How did you get into football?
Football, I mean, I grew up playing pretty much everything, much as my kids have been exposed to a lot of different sports, a lot of different activities. My parents did the same with my brothers and I growing up. And so football was one that I guess kind of came naturally. I didn't start playing until high school, but my dad had actually for many years coached high school football. He was a high school principal in Peel Region in Mississauga. And we used to go and watch his high school games quite often, and would be peering over his shoulder as he would be putting together lineups and game plans and things like that when he was at home. As I said, my brother Daryl and I, we didn't play organized football until high school, but we were always sort of playing, whether it was throwing the ball around in the yard or, quite frankly, setting up old mattresses and cushions in the basement and doing one-on-one tackling drills without telling mom and dad. So it was always kind of a way of life. And once we got into high school at Port Credit Secondary School, great football tradition there at the time. Pete Martin, longtime Toronto Argonaut, was the senior football coach there at the time. And so Pete was my coach for a couple of years. And, that was sort of the introduction to it. Part of the irony of it for me, I guess, is I've always said, half jokingly, but I mean, it's an honest thing in terms of skill. Like, yeah, I was a good high school football player. I was actually probably a better high school basketball player than football player in terms of skill, but there was, I guess, from a recruiting point of view, a much greater market for, 200 plus pound university running backs than there was for 6 foot power forwards at the time, and continues to be that way. And so it was a pretty easy choice for me. And particularly when Western came calling, I was a fullback in high school. Western had a fullback driven offense. Blake Marshall, who remains to this day one of my all time favorite players. Blake Marshall had won the Heck Crichton Trophy, was the second overall pick in the CFL draft in 1987, which was when I was coming out of high school. And so I had watched Western pretty closely. My brother Daryl was there in his first year, that fall of 86. And it was an easy choice for me, both academically and athletically. The football program was a great fit. They had the top rated phys ed program in the province at the time. That was what I had chosen to study. And, Larry Haler, who was the coach, may not really have realized it at the time, but I can honestly say that it would have been the easiest recruiting job of his coaching career, because my decision was made well before I went there.
Well, I mean, what better place is there for a guy coming out of high school thinking about a college to go to than Western? I mean, you got the great support, the great tradition, but you did have some pretty big shoes to fill, following up Blake Marshall's career. And that little pressure felt there for you.
Not really, because it was a gradual thing, and in those days, a little different than it is now. I would say in terms of recruiting and promises made, and and readiness of players. I mean, in so many ways, right? This is the instant gratification generation, and it wasn't that way in 1987. I mean, the fact was, I went to Western in the fall of 87, knowing that in that 86 season, they literally only had one first-year player who had been on the roster the entire season, like who even dressed for a game the entire season. And that was Dave Sapungis, who obviously was a
Oh
pretty
yeah,
special
the
player
sponge.
himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, they had, as I said, a great team, lost in the national championship, but for my money, they were the best team in the country in 86, had a number of players drafted and had some guys move on. And so it meant that there were some spots on the roster. And so I got to dress, as did a handful of first year guys for some games in first year. But, I didn't become a starter until my third year. I played a lot in my second year, but didn't become a starter until my third year. So I kind of eased into it. So I didn't have the immediate thing at 18 years old of having to try to fill Blake's shoes.
No, and you know what? And the team, you talked about the team concept here and what you had going on at Western. And I mean, the team lost, I think it was one regular season game in the entire 4 years you were there. So that's
Yeah.
what I call a dynasty. That was pretty impressive. We just saw some of the highlights of the Vanier Cup title, but in the Atlantic Bowl, leading up to your Vanier Cup title there, you were the MVP of the game. 22 carries for 219 yards. That's a pretty impressive effort. Was that the best game you ever had?
Yeah, you know what? I'm not a huge stats guy. Obviously, that has not necessarily been my role, especially post university. But yeah, that would be in terms of numbers, the biggest, the most productive game of my career, and to have it happen on a big stage was kind of neat. We knew going into St. Mary's that our game plan was our offense was built around the fullback trap, that we were going to run trap. And our coaches felt that we were going to have an opportunity to get some big plays from that. And we basically said, we are going to run trap in every situation in terms of down, distance, field position. We're going to run trap. And that was exactly what we did, and had a lot of success doing it. And came away with a victory in that Atlantic Bowl, and obviously moved on the next week to win the Vanier Cup.
Yeah, tough win over St. Mary's, but then you get to the Vanier Cup, 30,000 people. I think it was the first one at the Sky Dome, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was.
30,000 fans there, and you're playing Saskatchewan, and you did a number on the Huskies. You had a great game, so did Tyrone Williams, of course.
Mhm.
What was it like though to play, in that game, and of course having your brother Daryl in the team as well? That had to be fun.
Yeah, it was pretty special. I mean, that entire team honestly was a special group of guys that I still hold near and dear. And to play in that first Vanier Cup in what was then the Sky Dome was pretty amazing. I mean, it's this state of the art facility, no matter where you are in the world. When you think back to 1989, and to have that many fans, obviously for us, we were always well supported at Western, but to have that many fans in the stands in that facility was absolutely amazing. I remember coming out for the warm up, and at that stage of my career, being nervous for university games was not the norm anymore at that point. But I
Yeah.
remember definitely feeling a few jitters before that one, because it was just a much bigger stage than any of us had ever been on before. But we settled in pretty quickly and got the job done.
Got drafted by the Stampeders, and played for them for 4 years. The captain there for 4 years. What do you think made them choose you as captain? And tell us about that experience.
Yeah, it was. I guess a little bit in terms of the journey to get there. For me, I was drafted by Calgary in 91, played my first couple of years there, 91 and 92, and then got traded to Winnipeg in what was the option year of my contract. So I played 93 in Winnipeg and played out my option there. And then moved on in free agency to Toronto. So I came home for a couple of years, and then had a chance in 96 to go back to Calgary, and ended up going back there for 5 more years. And I guess it was 97 that we had a number of veteran guys retire, and we started the season slowly. We actually hadn't picked captains at the start of the year, but as I said, a number of veteran guys had retired after the 96 season, moved on. Guys like Stu Laird, Dave Sapunjas, Rodney Harding, who had been with us briefly after being a longtime Toronto Argonaut. But guys who were pretty big voices in the room. Alan Pitts was injured and wasn't with the team to start the year. So it was, it was a little different. I think we probably started the year with a little bit of a leadership void for a team that had been very successful to that point in the 90s. I remember we started the year 1-3. And, I know there was a particular moment for me at halftime of a game in Montreal. We were getting killed in the first half of the game. I think we were down 30-0 at halftime. And, I spoke up and said something at halftime of that game. And I think that was probably the moment for me of stepping into a leadership role with that team, where there had sort of always been others that had filled that role. It was kind of my time. And I think others, fortunately had a respect for me and had enough faith in me in that role to vote me as one of the team captains. And so I remained in that role through the rest of my time in Calgary through 2000. And, considering the guys that I played with during that time, and again, what I consider that 5-year span, 96 to 2000 in Calgary, really my favorite time of my entire career, my favorite teammates, et cetera. Pretty special for me, for sure. It means a lot to have been voted a captain of that group.
So the big question is did you win the game after your halftime speech?
You know what? We didn't win that game in Montreal, but we actually did come back. So I'm pretty sure, as I said, I think it was 30-0 at halftime. I think the game ended up at 30-28 or something like that. So
whoa.
Yeah, we shut them down. We did all the scoring in the second half and had a shot to win. So certainly the second half of that game represented kind of a moral victory, I would say.
All right, he's our captain for sure. Okay, so now, but another reason, another way you become a team captain, a team leader, is by being a guy who plays game in and game out, who comes to play. Well, you're a guy who played in 150 straight games over 8 seasons, counting regular season and playoffs. That's quite an Ironman streak. How are you able to put that together? Like, how'd that happen in a game like football, where you can get banged up and go, 3 games is a good streak,
Yeah, I do think that some people are fortunate to be, whether it's genetics or what have you, to be kind of wired or constructed in a certain way, maybe to be a little bit more durable than others. And I suppose I'm probably one of those people. I've always taken my preparation very, very seriously, and have been pretty detailed in terms of making sure I was physically prepared for the season. Always tried to work hard in the off season and through the season. As I learned more and more about how to take care of yourself and recovery between games, and sort of maintaining your strength and so on through the season. And so that's a big part of it for me. And part of it, quite honestly, is mentality. Is I never wanted to show weakness, never wanted to have people see me sitting out or missing games or missing practice. And then that's just something, that probably comes a little bit from my family and from my parents. I probably didn't miss more than, I would say, about 6 days of school, like from elementary school through high school through university. If I had a half dozen days that I missed school because I was sick in my entire life, that would be a high number. So I have always, I guess, taken pride in showing up.
Yeah, I don't want to tell you about how many times I missed school. that would be a lot to count. Uh, 5 Grey Cup appearances, and you won twice, and that's a lot of Grey Cup appearances for somebody who's in the league 8 or 9 years. So, and you won twice. A lot of guys never even get to the big game. A lot of guys never win it. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, and for me, as a guy, a Canadian, a guy who grew up watching the Canadian Football League, I grew up in a family of Toronto Argonaut season ticket holders. I can tell you to this day, we were section 47, row 41 on the covered side of Exhibition Stadium. Um, you know, it used to be my parents, my brother Daryl, and I used to go to games all the time in the days of 40,000 plus at that stadium. And so, first of all, to grow up and have an opportunity to play in the league, for me, it meant a lot because this was something I aspired to. This was a league that I watched all the time. I attended my first Grey Cup as a fan in Toronto versus Edmonton in the fall of 1982. And, years later to have the opportunity to play in that game and be in it several times, obviously is a dream come true for me. But one of the things that I always go back to, though, is my first year in the league. One of my teammates who I remember very well was Lloyd Fairbanks. And so I was born in 1969. Lloyd's first year in the league was, I believe, 1975. So basically I was in nursery school or kindergarten when Lloyd started his career. And so my first year in the league, 1991, marked the first time in his entire career, so 17-year career, that was the first and only time that Lloyd ever made it to a Grey Cup. And so for me, that was something that always stuck in my mind, that you don't want to take for granted getting there. And so, while I was very fortunate my first 3 years in the league, 2 years with Calgary and then 93 in Winnipeg, my first 3 years in the league, I went to the Grey Cup every year, but honestly never took that for granted because I remembered Lloyd's story. And so for me, it was from 93, another 5 years until 98 before I was fortunate enough to get back there and have an opportunity to win again. Everyone is unique. It's always a different team, different group of teammates, different game, a different Grey Cup week, different journey to get there, and all of those things. So everyone means something. Everyone is a little bit different and creates its own memories.
Right. So me and my friend Rod, we would join the Woodward's Knot Hole Gang in Edmonton, right? That's where we grew up. And
Yeah.
it was awesome. It cost you $1 to join the Knot Hole gang and $1 for each ticket. So we'd hop on the bus, and I think it's 25 cents for both ways. Hop on the bus, go
Mhm.
to Old Clark Stadium, right, and watch the game. And we'd sit in the Knot Hole gang with the other kids and for a half, and then during that time, the second quarter, we start looking. We start looking where the empty seats are, in the good seats. That's where we're going. So in the third quarter, we go on sit in some of the good seats. But I talk about lean years. Okay, so we're talking about the late '60s, and things were pretty
Yeah,
lean in Edmonton for that time. So I know what Lloyd Fairbanks went through, not as a player, obviously, but as a fan. And but then things turn around, right? So when things turn around, they can
that's
turn
right.
around in a hurry. And who's the best player that you played with or against, I guess?
Yeah, I would say that. The easy answer that should almost be disqualified from the category is Doug Flutie. I had the pleasure of playing with Doug in Calgary in '92. Absolutely phenomenal. In today's video game terms, Doug is the ultimate cheat code. He was kind of always gave you an unfair advantage. As skilled, as talented as Doug was, one of the things people probably don't necessarily realize is that he wasn't just a great quarterback. Doug was a guy who was an absolutely phenomenal athlete. Like he, came into training camp. In those days, we did all the physical testing in training camp. Doug was a guy who would come in and run one of the fastest 40-yard dashes on the team. He'd be as fast as the receivers. Strong, quick, smart, all of those things, very accurate passer, and so on. And obviously just an incredible football IQ, but his will to win was unreal, that he was just a guy who was going to find a way. And it goes along with that, generously speaking, 5'9" frame,
Yeah, yeah.
The fact that this is a guy who football was his chosen sport and he was fantastic at it. But, you could go and shoot hoops with Doug or go to a batting cage with Doug, anything with Doug. He, would occasionally make a trip to the casino with some of the guys. And even there, it's kind of
he would win there
odds
too.
kind of the house, right? Doug would get mad if Doug didn't win. He was just that kind of competitive guy. But if you take Doug out of the equation, the guy that I always say is the best. And again, another guy with just a phenomenal work ethic. That people see the talent, see the production, and so on. But a guy who worked hard at it was Alan Pitts. A guy who, to this day, I consider the best receiver to ever play in the Canadian Football League.
He was awesome, all right, that's for sure. Now, so how did you get into becoming an analyst? How did you get the gig at TSN? How'd that come together? And tell us about that experience.
Yeah, it's not something that I set out to do. Quite frankly, I was a guy who. I went to university. I studied phys ed, kinesiology, took some French courses as well. And the plan all along for me was that I was going to be a high school teacher. That has always been the plan. And, something that I have done in my life and in my career as well, and that I've loved doing. But in terms of the broadcasting, for me, the way it actually came about was towards the end of my career. I played my last 2 years, 2001, 2002, in Hamilton. I had gone there as a free agent after the 2000 season. And in 2001, we were out of the playoffs. We got knocked out, lost in the semifinals, the East Division final, to my buddy Milt Stiegel and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And the Grey Cup that year, it ended up being Winnipeg and Calgary. So basically my old teammates from the previous 5 years and the team we had just lost to were meeting in the Grey Cup in Montreal. I got together with a bunch of my buddies from Western, and we decided to go spend a couple of days and go see the Grey Cup game in Montreal. Obviously, for a group of relatively young guys, Montreal is always a fun weekend trip, and Grey Cup for, I think, any Canadian sports fan, especially a bunch of guys with a background in football and a little bit of a vested interest in the game, I suppose. It was an opportunity, I guess, in being out of the playoffs to go and enjoy the game. Sherry, my now wife, was actually in town covering the game as well. She was working in Calgary at the time. And so, yeah, with a bunch of buddies, I ended up going to the game. And after the Grey Cup game, we ended up, out in a bar, I think Thursdays or Winston's or one of those places on Crescent Street. We were out after the game and out with a number of members of the media were there as well. And one of those who was there was Elliot Friedman, who was working for CBC on their Canadian Football League coverage at the time. Or actually, I guess Elliot would have still been at the Score. Sorry, he would have still been at the Score in those days. It was prior to him going to work at CBC. And Elliot had actually been involved with the school paper and school radio and so on at Western at the same time as I and the group of guys that I was with were playing football at Western. So he knew all the guys that I was with, and we were all hanging out together and talking and stuff like that. And Elliot and I got into a conversation about the game. And I guess I probably turned somewhat analytical during this conversation, I suppose. I don't really know. But at the end of this conversation, Elliot turned to me and said, if you're not playing next year, or if you guys aren't in the playoffs, you should come and work for us at the Score and come and be our playoff analyst. And as fate would have it, the season went south for us in Hamilton in 2002, my final year. We ended up going 7-11 that year and missed the playoffs and missed the playoff bonus checks that go along with missing the playoffs. Uh-huh. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to give Elliot a call and see if I can make up some of this lost playoff income. And so I ended up going into the Score for the 3 weeks of playoffs and being their studio analyst and kind of previewing the games and breaking down the games afterwards and so on. And ended up going back in the same role the next year in 2003 when I wasn't playing. And from there, it evolved into a job at the Score as I was their CFL analyst, so doing segments talking about the Canadian Football League. I ended up becoming their analyst on University Rush, which was their Ontario University football broadcast. So I was the color analyst on those. By the next year, 2000, I guess it would have been by 2005, we started doing the show, weekly CFL talk show, CFL Snap. And, all of this was kind of my introduction. I was also a suite reporter, which is the guys who were voicing highlights on the wheel of highlights at the score. So that was part of my gig as well. So I got to learn some other aspects of the business and see the behind the scenes. And I guess, my work as a CFL analyst there earned me an opportunity when TSN became the exclusive broadcaster of the Canadian Football League in 2008. They contacted me about coming and doing an audition, and things, I suppose, went well enough that they offered me the job, and there I have been ever since.
So that trip to Montreal, is that about the time you met Sherry as well? Is it?
I knew Sherry before because she was actually working in Calgary when I was playing covering in Calgary, and so, I mean, we knew each other before that, and got to know each other better over time.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so all right, so let's talk about the CFL now, and what can't think of any sports league that was hammered by the pandemic more than the CFL, because basically the league was completely shut down. How hard is it to come back from that? Oh, we seem to have lost you. You still there, Duane? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm there. Sorry, you were kind of breaking up on me a little bit.
Yeah, no worries.
But the CFL was hit hard. We know it's no secret that financially, economically, the CFL is in a little bit different situation than leagues like the NFL, NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball that can find ways financially to still have it be profitable to play games without fans in the stands and so on, and also have the resources to be able to operate in a way that you need to operate during the pandemic, with the amount of testing that needs to go on, the restrictions, creating bubbles, accommodations, facilities, additional staff, all of those things, that can be challenging when you're watching the budget a little bit more tightly. I'm a believer that it was the right thing for the CFL to not play in 2020. Having said that, absence certainly makes the heart grow fonder. I think we all look forward to a return to the field coming up this week, 2021, and getting things underway. It's going to be interesting to watch, obviously, early on, because there's that lack of continuity, right? You've got veteran players who we're going to be asking questions for the first few weeks of the season. Basically, have some of the veteran guys benefited from having extra time off, extra time to recover, and are maybe healthier than they've been in several years? Or, the fact is, are those guys now just a year and a half older than when we last saw them? And, a year and a half without having played the game. And I think you're going to see different results from different players. It's going to take some time with no preseason. It may not be that finely tuned a machine at the beginning of the season, but as I said, we're all glad to have it back, and we'll be absolutely thrilled to see these guys on the field and be up and running at full speed very, very quickly.
Yeah, there could be some surprises. There almost always is, of course. What about the potential merger that they were talking about at one point with the XFL? What happened there? Is that ever going to be a thing, or what's the deal there?
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if there are some continued conversations about maybe some synergies between the leagues. I can just tell you from my perspective, one of the things that I have felt about this all along is the only way to me if there was going to be some sort of merger between the two leagues. And it's something that wasn't talked about and didn't seem to be the road they were going down from the way that things were reported. But quite frankly, to me, if you look at the history, no other league of American football based in North America has ever survived long-term sort of alongside the National Football League. Many have come and gone over the course of my lifetime. And then on the other hand, you've got the Canadian Football League, literally the only other professional football league in North America that has survived alongside the National Football League, has actually been around longer than the National Football League. And so as to why you would, in looking at a merger of any kind with the XFL, as to why you would play with American rules and essentially become another league of American football, we all kind of know how that ends, right? Like looking at history, as the saying goes, I mean, the best predictor of future behavior, future results is past results. Other leagues playing American football in North America have not been successful. Meanwhile, you've got a league doing something different, and albeit primarily in a different country, but the fact is it's been the only league to survive. So why you wouldn't say, yeah, okay, we'll look at doing this, but it's going to be Canadian rules, and we're going to market the game and actually teach American fans about Canadian rules before we do this. And we're going to ensure that there's Canadian content on every team because it's our league. I mean, to me, there are things about that would make sense. And when I look at the two leagues, I can understand quite obviously why the two leagues would want to talk to each other, why there would be ways in which each could benefit from the other. As I said, the XFL looks and says, well, hell, we've folded twice in the last 20 years. And over here, we've got a league that's lasted for over 100 years and has managed to coexist with the NFL. We should talk to those guys. And if you're the Canadian Football League looking to make inroads, looking for some kind of network broadcast contract in the US, you're looking at the XFL guys who have that, despite the fact that they've had struggles in other ways. But you're looking at them going, yeah, we should probably talk to those guys. And so the conversation makes sense from those points of view in terms of best business practices. What can we gain from each other? Is there something here? I completely understand that. But, to look at kind of potentially giving up Canadian football and the Canadian Football League is something that never made a lick of sense to me.
Right. It would be hard to. I don't think there's any way to do it unless they went to Canadian rules. The only thing I could see is this: you've got the CFL playing here, the XFL playing here. There is some quasi kind of thing. I mean, maybe you do a thing like they do in the National League where the pitcher hits, and in the American League where the pitcher doesn't hit. Maybe you play in a championship game, you play a half of 3-down football and a half of 4-down football. I don't know how you do it, but or when you play the XFL teams in a crossover, then you go there, you play 4-down rules. You come here, you play 3. I don't know. It would be maybe crazy, but who knows? It might even. You never know.
Yeah, well, the CFL does crazy rules as well as anyone, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The single point for a missed field goal still doesn't jive with some people, but that's okay. It is the CFL, right? Another big loss we had, in addition to the pandemic, is big loss. Chris Schultz passed away recently from a heart attack. Chris, obviously a great football player, played for the Cowboys, played a long time for the Argos, All-Star many times. Also a great analyst, and you know what? Just a heck of a great guy. I used to see him frequently, in the makeup room after the show or before the show, and had a lot of conversations with Chris, and miss him. He's just a really, really nice guy. Came as such a stunner, when he was gone. Tell us about your connection with Chris.
Yeah, and for me it goes back to 1994, and I was a free agent. I had played the previous year in Winnipeg and was looking to move on as a free agent, and ended up having an opportunity to sign with the Toronto Argonauts, my hometown team. And so I remember going into the Argo facility to meet with Bob Obilovich, who was the head coach and general manager. It was as I said, during the off season. And, quite literally, there was one player in the facility in there working out, watching film that day. And sure enough, it was Schultz. And so that was the day. Obviously, I had watched Schultz, followed his career from his time in Dallas, certainly through his time in the Canadian Football League. Had followed him and was well aware, certainly, of who he was. But that was the day that I met Chris Schultz. And, I would say that the two of us clicked relatively instantly. Very friendly, welcoming guy to me as a new teammate coming in. As fullback and offensive tackle, we worked together a lot on the field, and just as I said, like kind of communicated well together, clicked, got along very well together from day one. And Schultz remains one of my all-time favorite teammates, but. I go back to that story of meeting him in there during the offseason. He had been injured at the end of the 93 season and was in there making sure he was healthy. But I mean, he wasn't just in there working out. Like middle of the offseason, he was in there watching film. And that, whether it was as a player or as a broadcaster, that was Schultz. He was a preparation guy. He was always going to be ready to go, sort of put his heart and soul into it. He was a guy who, watching film, practice film or day after games, watching film, Schultz would be the first guy in there with his pen and his notebook, taking notes and, kind of leading by example. He wasn't the most outspoken guy in the locker room or anything like that, but, but I would say just led by example in terms of his work ethic and, a very intense competitor, but a fantastic, as I said, sort of friendly, welcoming teammate that is a guy who remained that not just on the field, but, as I said, certainly with TSN as a broadcaster, remained a great friend and great teammate to me. And I think anybody who knew Schultz feels that loss still.
Yeah, a tremendous loss. A really gentle giant and a really good guy. So we will definitely miss him. Back to playing football. The league's theme this year is Rise With Us. It sounds appropriate and catchy. I like it. Rise With Us. So after 1 year hiatus, now the action starts with a 14 game schedule. And let's talk about some of the teams in the league right now. First of all, here's with the week one matchups. The week one matchups are going to be here we got the Grey Cup rematch between the Hamilton Ticats and the Blue Bombers, and that should be interesting. See how that pans out. And then of course the Lions in Saskatchewan on the Friday night. Toronto opens up against Calgary, and Eric Rogers facing his old team. And then Ottawa versus Edmonton on Saturday. So those are the week one matchups. But let's talk about the teams individually. First of all, the Argos, they made a complete overhaul after a year where they went 4-14. Obviously, it's not a bad thing to overhaul a team when you're 4-14. John Murphy now joins the pinball to run the show, and the new head coach is Ryan Dinwiddie. What do you think about what's happening in Toronto?
Well, a couple of things. I think that John Murphy as a personnel guy is a guy who's been around this league for a long time, and one of the things about Murph is he's very well connected in terms of finding players and finding ways to get players, basically. And so he's been able to bring together a lot of free agents, get a number of veteran established players from other teams. You talk about the creativity and look at the deal that brought a few guys from Calgary, Eric Rogers, Robertson Daniel, Cordero Law, productive guys from Calgary on the verge of becoming free agents, and he acquires their rights and gets them signed in Toronto and gives this team a little bit of an injection, not just of talent, but also of winning culture, with guys coming from what has been the most successful franchise in the league in recent years. Very active in free agency. I look at the coaching staff, and in particular, the hiring of Ryan Dinwiddie is huge to me. I'm a big believer that the way that the Canadian Football League has evolved is that really kind of your most important hire in today's Canadian Football League, or your most important signing, is it's almost become a point where it matters less who you have playing quarterback than it matters have coaching your quarterbacks. And Ryan Dinwiddie is a guy who has had great success, particularly during his time in Calgary, and I think sometimes gets overlooked, right? We talk a lot about, Hall of Famer John Huffnagel and Hall of Famer Dave Dickinson as these quarterback gurus, and kind of forget that the actual quarterback coach in Calgary was Ryan Dinwiddie, working with Bo Levi Mitchell on a daily basis. And so, coming from that system and looking at the success that he's had, he gets to work with Nick Arbuckle, a guy with whom he worked in Calgary. And, Arbuckle is a relatively inexperienced guy, had a good run in Calgary, produced some wins for them when Mitchell was out of the lineup. And so I look forward to that combination. But I mean, Dinwiddie's presence is going to be huge there. And, with Arbuckle and McLeod Bethel Thompson, who, has certainly he's had his ups and downs, but he's had some impressive moments there that, they're in a decent spot at the all important quarterback position. And as I said, I think they've got the right guy looking after those quarterbacks as well.
Well, yeah, because Bethel Thompson actually had the third best numbers in the league when they last played. So Nick Arbuckle will push him a little bit, I'm guessing, and then maybe he'll get his opportunity as well. And like you mentioned earlier, Eric Rogers, Devarius Daniels coming over. Defensively, you got some veterans like Charleston Hughes and Odell Willis. I think between the two of them, they're like 85 or something like that. They probably played with you did. I don't know. New defensive coordinator with Glenn Young. He's a Scarborough boy, former Argos linebacker. Helped coach the Bombers to a cup title. So things are looking pretty good there. Now let's move down the QEW a little bit to Hamilton. The Ticats. Now, special teams will be pretty deadly with Frankie Williams and Brandon Banks, the reigning outstanding player. Add Devere Posey to the mix, and of course another good quarterback scrap with Jeremiah Masoli and Dane Evans.
Yeah, and again, it's the critical position, right? This is a quarterback-driven league, and the Tiger Cats learned, as we saw, when we last played in 2019, the importance of being strong and having depth at that position, and coaches being able to put players in position to be successful, and both Masoli and Dane Evans have been very, very successful under offensive coordinator Tommy Condell. Terrific group of receivers there, as you mentioned. Devere Posey comes over to join that group. You look forward to a potent offense from Hamilton. A couple of guys have come and gone. I guess Larry Dean basically kind of coming and going during the, from the 2020 through to 2021 season, returned and then left again. But you've still got Simone Lawrence, who was the top defensive player in the East Division in 2019, a dominant guy. You've still got some pretty good pass rush guys up front, which is always critical in this league, with people like Dylan Wynn and Jagarad Davis. Terrific organization. I think that the Hamilton Tiger Cats are, from top to bottom, very well run. I think Drew Alamang and Sean Burke do a terrific job on the personnel side in terms of bringing in American talent, bringing in Canadian talent through the draft. I mentioned Tommy Condell as offensive coordinator, but Orlando Steinauer as their head coach, Jeff Reinbold as their special teams coordinator. These guys have done just a fantastic job and provide terrific leadership. The Ticats had their best season ever in 2019, obviously a disappointing end to it, but a lot of continuity there that I think you've got a lot of guys approaching this season with a feeling that they have unfinished business.
Right, 15-3 in 2019. That's very, very good season. Now let's go to Montreal. Danny Machocha now is running the show in Montreal, and he's an interesting character. What do you think about what's happening with the Owls?
Yeah, and Danny is a guy, he comes over from the University of Montreal, obviously a long history and successful history in the Canadian Football League, from a guy who started off as a volunteer assistant coach with the Montreal Alouettes, went on to become a head coach in Edmonton, won a Grey Cup there, very successful university coach at the University of Montreal, and knows that market, knows that city well, obviously knows the French-Canadian talent, the talent in Quebec, and has demonstrated that in the draft in the last couple of years, bringing in some terrific local players who will be a big part of not only helping to improve that team on the field, but also in terms of selling tickets. I hope when you have those local guys that the community can get behind a little bit. 2019 was the coming of age of Vernon Adams, and again, I go back to that theme of look at who's coaching the quarterback and making sure that your quarterback is being put in a position to be successful. And it coincides with the appointment of Kahari Jones as their head coach. He and Vernon Adams clicked. Adams went from a guy who most people would have described as a CFL bust, a guy who came into this league with big expectations after a stellar college career at Eastern Washington and Oregon. And it takes time, right? We have to be reminded sometimes that this is professional football, and very rarely do you get the Ricky Ray phenomenon, quite frankly, of a guy coming straight from college to being immediately successful in the Canadian Football League. It doesn't happen often. It's a process. It's a journey. Vernon Adams has persevered through that journey, and I think he's a guy who is on the verge of something special as a CFL quarterback. Terrific, as I said, in 2019. I wish that there had been that continuity, that momentum for him continuing in 2020. But I look forward to seeing him pick up where he left off this summer.
Right. Well, even Warren Moon had to back up Tom Wilkinson for a little while. So
That's
remember
right.
that, right? So Ottawa, they closed their season losing 15 of their last 16 games. Any hope for these guys at all? They did add Matt Nichols.
Yeah, you know what? I'm a believer largely in what that coaching staff is going to do. Paul LaPolice is head coach. Mike Benavides is their defensive coordinator. Two guys that I know well through a number of avenues, including time that both of them have spent working at TSN. But connections that go well beyond that with both of those guys, and I'm a huge believer. Starting with Lapo as head coach, again, another guy who is an incredibly creative offensive play caller. That's where he's made his mark, is in terms of being creative, putting his players in a position to be successful, calling a game. These are things that Paul does exceptionally well. He's got, as you mentioned, Matt Nichols at quarterback, a guy who understands his scheme, his expectations, and has had great success with Lapo as his head coach. So I think that combination immediately, kind of brings the Ottawa Red Blacks up to speed with the way that the Canadian Football League is trending. You need to have your coaching staff and your quarterback on the same page, and now they've got that. Mike Benavides, Benny, is quite frankly one of my favorite guys in the Canadian Football League. We go back to 2000 when Mike was a volunteer assistant coach in Calgary, moved out there on his own dime and came out to learn under Wally Buono. That was my last year playing in Calgary. And, I've had the opportunity to see Mike work close up. When you look at his career, this is a guy who, quite frankly, every team he's gone to, whether as head coach, assistant coach, what have you, the team has always done better after his arrival than they did before he got there. And every team he has left has done worse after he left than they did in his last season there. Mike is a very good football coach, and his presence is going to be big there as well.
There's something to be said about those volunteer assistant coaches, Duane. Yeah.
Hey, paying your dues.
Yeah. So in the West, the Blue Bombers obviously defending champs. Zach Collaros came on late in 2019. Really, now he's got a full training camp, full season to get. I mean, is this team unstoppable? I mean, Andrew Harris. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's too much competition in this league to call anybody unstoppable, but certainly in that 2019 Grey Cup, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers appeared to be just that. As a player, as a person, I don't think I could be happier for anyone than I was for Zach Collaros, for the adversity that he had faced over the previous couple of years in his career, battling injuries and bouncing around a little bit. For him to have the opportunity to demonstrate that he is still one of the elite quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League, a very deserving Grey Cup champion, and I look forward to seeing him stay healthy and play at that level through an entire season. He seems to have found a fit in Winnipeg. There may be some growing pains and a little bit of an adjustment post Paul LaPolice, as we mentioned, who's moved on from being their offensive coordinator to being the head coach in Ottawa. But but I mean, Zach obviously solidifies that position for them. An experienced guy now, right? A guy who's sort of 10 years in to his Canadian Football League career. Incredibly competitive, incredibly tough, smart, does it all. As I said, look forward to seeing him do that over the course of an entire season. They start the season banged up a little bit, and as I think for a lot of teams, injuries may be a little bit of a factor this year with some quick turnaround weeks with the condensed schedule, shortened training camp, and so on. So, we won't see Andrew Harris to start the season. Darvin Adams, their most experienced and top receiver, likely on the shelf as well to start the season. There's been a little bit of shuffling on that offensive line as well. But, I'm sure that they'll find their way on offense, particularly as those guys get healthy. And, when you've got a defense that starts with Willie Jefferson and, a guy who has come a long way as his running mate, Jackson Jeffcoat at the other defensive end spot. You've got an anchor like Adam Bighill at middle linebacker. Lots to be excited about and lots to have continued confidence in for the defending Grey Cup champions.
Well, you're talking about injuries. What about the Roughriders? My God, four Roughriders suffered. All four suffer an Achilles injury 2 days before training camp. What's with that? How does that happen?
Yeah, not sure
Snake
exactly what was going on behind closed doors in terms of what they were doing, but I think it speaks a little bit to some of the challenges that teams will face. So that's obviously an extreme case when you talk about the nature of injuries, but you look at guys getting back into activities that they maybe haven't done in a year and a half or perhaps longer. You can be in shape, you can work out, you can train, you can do lots of things, but the only way to get in football shape is to play football. And so you've got this kind of condensed training camp. You have no preseason games. Guys are kind of jumping into regular season intensity, sort of going right from, inactivity to training camp to full speed in games, facing live bullets, so to speak. Coaches and players themselves are going to have to look after what we'll call the Kawhi Leonard load management a little bit early in the season to manage their health and ease their way into this, because 14 games is still a long season. It's a journey, and you want to make sure that you're there and healthy and able to peak at the right time.
Okay, so one thing they do have in Saskatchewan was Cody Fajardo. Led the league in passing, ran for 600 yards. That's pretty scary, dual threat right there.
Yeah, Cody Fajardo is a fascinating case to me, because Cody is a guy that I saw as a backup quarterback in Toronto. And, obviously the way our schedule works out, I've done a lot of games in the East Division in recent years and have seen the Argos play a lot. And Cody was a guy who, from the first time I saw him as a backup, was a guy that I thought, if you kind of build an offense around him and sort of call plays for him, as opposed to, say, calling the plays for the person that he's filling in for, so to speak. This was a guy that I always felt could be a very successful CFL quarterback. And that opportunity never really came in Toronto. We spent a year as a number 3 guy in BC, short yardage guy, didn't really get to play much. And, I whispered to a few people then, like, this is a guy buried as a number 3 quarterback that I think that there's more there to him given the opportunity. And, Zach Collaros' injury misfortune in Saskatchewan became the opportunity that Cody Fajardo needed to demonstrate that he can be a fantastic CFL quarterback. And you look at what he's done as a dual threat quarterback, as a leader of that team, great battery mate for him. Shaq Evans really emerged as one of the Canadian Football League's top receivers in 2019, and look forward to seeing those guys get right back at it as well. And so, Saskatchewan very successful in their last season. Much like I said about Vernon Adams, I really wish for Cody Fajardo, there's another one of those guys that I would have liked to have seen the momentum continue in 2020, and here's hoping that they can get right back in that groove this season.
Yeah, here's hoping. A lot of Rough Rider fans all across the country. Bo Levi Mitchell is one of the best, but the Stamps, they lost some key people in the offseason. Well, the offseason and a half, I guess.
Yeah, they did. And this is something, though, that I think comes along with success, and especially in a small league, as people see that success, other teams see that success, and your players are in demand. Everybody wants guys from a successful team. And, Calgary has done pretty well, whether it's been because of being rated a little bit in free agency or whether it has been simply because of injuries or retirements or what have you. But this is an organization that has done a great job over the years of finding who's going to be that next man up. John Hufnagel, again, terrific CFL quarterback, an even better CFL coach, and demonstrating that he may be an even better Canadian Football League general manager with the teams, the organization that he's put together. So yeah, we're going to see some new faces in Calgary, maybe that not the familiar ones we've seen with a lot of their success in recent years. But the fact is, you still have Dave Dickinson as your head coach, Bo Levi Mitchell as your quarterback, and again, John Hufnagel pulling the strings from the top. That Calgary is always going to find a way into the mix and put together a talented roster and be able to compete.
Okay, no more turnover. Just up the highway in Edmonton. New name, new look, new head coach, Jimmy Elizondo. A lot of new stuff happening in Edmonton.
Yes, the grammatically debatable Edmonton Elks. I'm not going to harp on that name, but is it not a herd of elk rather than a herd of elks? But but again, grammatically, I am a fan of the Toronto Maple Leaves, so we'll let that one go. But
that's right.
Edmonton, Jamie Elizondo is another one of those guys who's a terrific hire. This is an experienced Canadian Football League offensive assistant, again, in keeping with kind of making sure that you're on cue with your quarterback. Jamie is a guy who he and Trevor Harris would have similar roots, having spent time in this league in Toronto under Scott Milanovich. Milanovich kind of succeeded Jason Moss in Edmonton, even though technically Scott never got to coach a game in Edmonton, obviously due to the pandemic. But the synergies are there, right? Elizondo and Moss both would have coached under Milanovich in Toronto. Similar philosophies. When Jason Moss left Ottawa, Jamie Elizondo was the guy who replaced him there. So in terms of with Trevor Harris coming off just a fantastic year, Greg Ellingson as well in that offense, Ricky Collins, who's moved on, but the young Canadian Tavon Smith, part of a very good receiving core there. This group that all kind of clicked with their offensive system under Jason Moss. They found that continuity in bringing in Scott Milanovich. Milanovich moves back to the NFL in 2021. Jamie Elizondo, absolutely the perfect fit to keep Trevor Harris and his receiving core trending in the right direction in 2021. All of these guys who sort of come from the same offensive philosophy, the same background, that's going to be important. For me, as an aficionado of Canadian talent, one of the things I'm kind of excited about in watching Edmonton play this year is over on the defensive side of the ball. It looks like we're going to see 2 Canadian defensive ends starting for Edmonton in Kwaku Boateng and Matthew Betts. 2 terrific players, add some depth behind those guys, but the success of those guys contributed to the release of one of the most prolific pass rushers in this league over the last decade in Sean Lemon, who winds up back in Calgary after being let go by Edmonton. But I'm excited to see these 2 young Canadians do their thing from a traditionally American spot and make their mark. So, I mean, that to me is one of the storylines to keep an eye on with the Edmonton Elks.
Yes, the Elks. Can you remember that happening before, where you've got 2 Canadian defensive ends on the same team?
The most recent combination of 2 Canadians, I would say, didn't necessarily play every snap opposite each other, but you would have seen Ricky Foley and Brent Johnson together in BC, both be very productive. They had packages where both played together a lot, and eventually you got to a point where after Cam Wake left for the NFL, Ricky Foley kind of stepped in and filled that role opposite Brent Johnson a little bit. But it's been a little while, so I'm curious to see how these bookends fare by comparison.
Okay, well, speaking of the Lions, they're coming off a 5-13 season. Mike Riley, solid quarterback, but he took a beating. Really high sack percentage. I know that things got a little bit better towards the end of the season, but how much more beating can he afford to take, and the Lions afford to have their quarterbacks getting that kind of a pounding?
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to see their quarterback getting hit. Mike Riley, obviously, throughout his career, has already proven his toughness. We don't need to see him get up from another hard hit. As you alluded to, the protection got better once Kelly Bates joined that coaching staff. Longtime Canadian Football League offensive lineman, longtime Canadian football coach, both in the CFL and at the university level at Simon Fraser. You look for that offensive line and the protections to be shored up with Kelly joining that staff. I think they've improved themselves a little bit, certainly at the receiver position. That helps as well when you've got people getting open, quarterback maybe not having to hold on to the ball as long and so on. It all begins with the absolutely incredible Brian Burnham, good for at least one highlight a game. Fantastic, a lot of fun to watch. He and Mike Riley were a pair that clicked. Dominique Grimes, among those coming in, former Ottawa Red Black, Ottawa's leading receiver, comes over to BC in free agency. And, he's a guy that they look to sort of help take the load off of Brian Burnham. Some younger Canadian guys, Shaq Johnson, a veteran now, but Lamar Durant, Javon Catoy. Durant is a guy that is absolutely one of my favorite players in the league. I think, freakishly athletic, offers an ability to stretch the field. He was a great complement in the slot to Brian Burnham, and I look forward to, as they kind of develop a more balanced offense, more balanced passing offense. I think even bigger things are ahead for Lamar Durant. Catoy may not see quite as many snaps this year as they look to have a little bit more American content in that receiving core, but a guy who now a couple of years older with a little bit of experience, unique physical package, big receiver, 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds. I like the mismatch opportunities that he presents for them in that offense as well. And certainly look forward to seeing BC have something of a rebound year under their new head coach, Rick Campbell, who comes over from Ottawa.
Right, and defensively, what about Jordan Williams, top pick in 2020? Is he a difference maker? Can he be?
Over time, again, I think it can be challenging for any American player to come in immediately to the world of Canadian football, and you're not only stepping up a level in terms of the football you're playing and the pace of it, but adjusting to different rules and motion, that weird extra man on the field and people moving before the snap, a little bit bigger field that changes some of your angles and spacing and things like zone drops and pursuit angles and things like that. You think you've got contained and got a guy cut off, and he's got a few more yards to get around the corner and things like that. So there's an adjustment period, but Jordan Williams is a guy who on paper, and certainly watching his college highlights, is a guy who certainly kind of fits the mold of a Canadian Football League middle linebacker. And, I look forward to seeing him make that adjustment over the course of the season and the contributions he's able to make for the Lions as a Canadian starter.
Anybody you're looking ahead to the season? Is there one guy that kind of sticks out? One or two guys that stick out as potential superstars in waiting? Guys that we're gonna go, whoa, where'd this guy come from?
It becomes difficult to say just because of that year off. Like we talked about it a little bit with some of the young quarterbacks, right? The first year starters like Cody Fajardo and Vernon Adams, where you think, we could be setting the stage like after years of, sort of Bo Levi Mitchell versus Mike Riley, and, who's the best quarterback in the league, who's the best player in the league, that being the debate. You kind of think, hey, we could be setting the stage for this becoming, a Vernon Adams versus Cody Fajardo for years, facing off as the MOP. If these guys continue on the trajectory they're on. It just becomes difficult to project when you throw this little blip in the radar into the mix. I say the same thing we talked earlier about veteran guys and kind of where are the veteran guys going to be at after a year off. The bottom line is, physically they may be more rested and healthier than they've been, but at the same time, it's hard to fight father time, and guys are a little bit older. And I look forward to seeing guys who have been superstars in this league, like a Mike Riley, like an Andrew Harris, like a Charleston Hughes, guys who have been among the elite. Seeing how these guys do with that battle. And I am certainly not going to bet against them based on what all of these guys have done through their career, but it's something that obviously becomes a little bit more of a factor as time goes on. And for us as viewers of the league, with a year without football, maybe these inclines or declines for certain players become a little more sudden, at least to us as viewers, right? Where usually these are things that may happen gradually. When you're looking at a 2-year change all at once, that it's hard to say exactly what we're going to see at the start of the year, but we're just glad to have all of them back.
Okay, so when the smoke clears, give us your pick for the Grey Cup.
Joe, I absolutely despise predictions. But I will be consistent. The one that I have given this year, if I have to label a favorite going into the season, with all of the uncertainty as I hedge my bets and defend my pick here, but for me, I would say Hamilton. The Hamilton Tiger Cats, to me, were sort of from start to finish the best team in the league in 2019. In a lot of ways, appear to be at least stronger now than they were then, particularly with two healthy quarterbacks. Dane Evans with a full year of experience under his belt, another couple of big games in terms of playoffs under the belt of the core group of this football team, but a very good team that has managed to keep some continuity. And again, this taking nothing away from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who are very similar, right? You look at the coaching resumes of Mike O'Shea, coaching and playing resumes of Mike O'Shea and Orlando Steinauer, and they virtually mirror each other. And so a lot of similarities there. That I thought Hamilton was a favorite going into that Grey Cup game. Winnipeg dominated in that game, and maybe gave Hamilton some much needed playoff experience, maybe a little bit of a wake-up call, even if they had become complacent over the course of a very successful regular season. That as I suggested earlier, I think you've got a lot of guys going into this season with a sense of unfinished business.
Mm-hmm. Good motivation. Okay, so yeah. I'm going to go on the limb. All right, so I'm seeing the Ticats beating the Alouettes in the East. Okay, And I
Uh-huh.
like the Riders to get past Winnipeg in the stunner in the West. And I'm looking
Uh-huh.
for Hamilton to beat Team Green in the Grey Cup. So we're both
All
on side with that one. Yeah,
right.
but I'm
Yeah.
looking for the surprise. I'm looking for Jardo to really have that outstanding breakout season. Well, he's already had that, but even better than he was before. Listen, Duane, I want to thank you for being on the show. This is great, very insightful, a lot of fun, and it's always good to talk to you, my friend. And as a guest on Joe Tilley Sports, we got a gift certificate for some awesome threads from Jeff at Classica Imports. So I'll send you that contact information. Go down and see Jeff. He'll hook you up with some pretty good looking stuff, and Sherry will love it. And maybe bring her along. And listen, thank you once again, and go Elks.
Absolutely my pleasure, Joe. Anytime. Look forward to catching up again soon.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Hi, this is Clint Malarchuk. Joe Tilley Sports coming up.
Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.
Excuse me. Have you heard of the new Divot app?
There's a Divot app?
No. But there is a Divot. And we're going to have to do something about that. It's simple. Just pick up the Divot and replace it. All sorted. Have a good round.
Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Joe Tilley Sports is brought to you by COSA, Central Ontario Standardbred Association, providing a united voice for harness horse people racing at Ontario tracks. Check out your benefits today at COSAonline.com and check out COSA TV on Facebook and YouTube for all the latest harness news and live action updates. Live racing year-round. Go to hpibet.com for all your wagering options. Become a member today, and your first bet is free. That's hpibet.com.
All right, time now for my COSA Swiss pick of the week. Well, last week we were at Mohawk for Friday night's 8th race. You know, I took the number 7 horse, who looked like she, so much more was the name of the horse, who looked so much more than all the horses except one. It was the favorite, Lita Rose, with Louis-Philippe Roy on the buggy, going last to first, just catching my horse at the wire. So that's 2 second-place finishes in a row for the Swiss. Look at that, almost got it. Now this week, I'm going to go to Mohawk for Tuesday night's race, and I'll take the number 4 horse, Toxicity. Now this is a horse that was claimed by Carmen Alciello. Jonathan Drury drives the gelding, who's coming off a pair of second-place efforts. I love that sound. My record on the year is now 6 wins, 4 seconds, 2 thirds, 5 fourths, 4 fifths, a 6th, 2 eighths, and a 10th. For all the racing updates, visit COSA TV on Facebook. Go to hpibet.com for your wagering options. Well, Canada's going to play for gold at the Olympics in women's soccer. Jessie Fleming scored on a penalty in the 72nd minute. Stephanie Labbe was solid between the pipes as the Canadian side bounced the U.S., their old nemesis, 1-0. They finally got some calls to go their way, and that is a pretty big deal, folks. What a team it's been. Penny Alexiak is now the most decorated Olympian in Canadian history. The 21-year-old Toronto native won her 7th career medal when she anchored the women's 4x100-meter relay to bronze. the team that got the bronze medal. Kylie Moss picked up silver in the 200-meter backstroke for her third medal of the games. A wonderful win by the Canadian women's eights in rowing. That was just such a blast seeing those gals get it done. And Andre DeGrasse got the men on the board, finishing third in the 100 meters. Well, the Blue Jays are definitely giving it a real shot, folks. The Birds got themselves a top of the rotation starter at the MLB trade deadline, acquiring right-hander Jose Barrios from the Twins for some very good prospects. Picture Simeon Woods Richardson, infielder Austin Martin, and the number 5 overall pick in last summer's draft. In 20 starts this year, Barrios has a 3.48 ERA, career best 25.7% strikeout rate, 6.5% walk rate, a career high 43.6% ground ball rate, and what a debut. 5 hits, no runs over 6 innings as the Jays swept KC. He's 27, has another year before he can file for free agency. Jays also required closer Brad Hand from the Nationals for catcher Riley Adams and veteran reliever Joakim Soria from the D-backs. George Springer starting to earn some of that big paycheck, biggest in club history. Jays are climbing into that wild card picture as George is going deep. For the first time in history, the Raptors drafted a homegrown player. They nabbed Toronto's Delano Banton in the second round, 46th overall. Banton is a 6'9" guard who played at Nebraska last season. He was the 47th pick. The Raps chose Louisville point guard David Johnson. The next pick, that was 46th pick. 47th pick, they chose David Johnson. The first round, of course, was Scotty Barnes, a small forward out of Florida State who many compare to another Scotty Pippen. You know, a lot of people thought they were going to go for Jalen Suggs, but remember when they were criticized for taking Vince Carter? It happens. Well, the Leafs added some size up front, signing Nick Ritchie to a 2-year deal worth $2.5 million. A 6'2", 234-pound former first-round pick is 25 years old. He's a tough dude, as you can see here. He had more career penalty minutes than games played so far in his career. He's an Orangeville native. He had 15 goals, 11 assists for the Bruins this past season, and plenty of penalty minutes. The Buds also inked Andre Koss, who's got some skill. 1 year, $1.25 million. The 162nd edition of the Queen's Plate, the first jewel in the Canadian Triple Crown, is coming in less than 3 weeks. The legendary Sandy Hawley and Jason Portuano will be dropping by in a couple of weeks for a plate preview. This past weekend, 3-year-old Philly scored off in the $500,000 Woodbine Oaks, the 66th edition of the first of 3 Triple Tiara races. Justin Stein guided Money Full Row to a very patient ride. At this point in the race, you're going to see Money Full Row sitting back in 6th spot. It was 8th at one point. She came from well off the pace. 8th position to finish strongly for trainer Kevin Attard. Money Full Row, as they head to the top of the stretch, is going to pull away alongside Emmeline, who is ridden by Emma Jane Wilson. And Money Full Row got the money. Money Full Row got the money. It was Emmeline hanging on for 2nd spot. And Il Malacchio got up for 3rd. The 10.69 tractor returned $482.10 on a $2 ticket. A good chance for Money Full Row, as she's pointed now towards the Queen's Plate after that very impressive performance. You see her starting to make her move right now on the very far outside. Money Full Row getting it done in $1,000 Woodbine Oaks.
Money for Row from Emmeline. Back in 3rd is Il Malocchio, and it's Money for Row and Emmeline going on. Il Malocchio down the outside, but it is Money for Row. Money for Row and Justin Stein have the Woodbine Oaks. Money for Row by a length. Close for second between.
By the way, Avalman won the Plate Trial Stakes and will be one of the favorites August 22nd. Congratulations to Eurico Rosa da Silva, a former guest on Joe Tilley Sports. Eurico has been named the 2021 Avelino Gomez Memorial Award recipient. Very well deserved. Eurico is one heck of a rider. Peterborough's Cody the Crippler Crowley was supposed to get his title shot next weekend. Unfortunately, the undefeated welterweight contracted COVID. He wasn't vaccinated. His bout against Gabriel Mestre of in Venezuela for the WBA's World Interim Welterweight belt has been scrapped. No word on when Cody will be able to get back into the gym and get that shot. I feel for the kid, but apparently he is feeling okay. Now, we close this show with the folks who make it possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, all-around great people. I highly recommend them all. A reminder that the show is now available on Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcast, Pocket Cast, as well as the Spanglish Network and Zingo TV. Thanks once again to Duane Forde for being on the program. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week when Tara Watchhorn drops by. We'll see you then.
Get Aldo at RE/MAX Crossroads. Do you want to buy or sell a home? Could 31 years of real estate experience help you? Why not speak to an amazing team that loves to overpromise and overdeliver? Call 416-GET-ALDO or visit www.getaldo.com to find out what next level real estate looks like. Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today, and let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. Brought to you by MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business consulting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the needs of our clients in the private, public, and non-for-profit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to doing business and personalized strategies to help people and organizations succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Toronto, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, our team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca to learn more.